to make all 5 items for your handbag, you'll need 1 fat quarter of plain fabric and another fat quarter of a patterned fabric. All pattern pieces must be cut out in a specific order. Please see my diagram to see how to cut your pieces out, and you do exactly the same for the pattern fabric as the plain fabric. You will also need some interfacing, some fusible fleece, a lobster clasp and some ribbon. The first item is a menstrual pad pouch. For this you will need a plain piece of fabric and a patterned piece of fabric measuring 15 inches long and 5 1/4 inches wide. You will also need a piece of fusible fleece measuring 14 1/2 inches long and 4 3/4 inches wide, and a ribbon 28 inches or 71 centimetres long and 1 centimetre or 1/2 inch wide. First you will need to attach the fusible fleece or interfacing to your patterned fabric, but on the wrong side of your patterned fabric, following the manufacturer's instructions. Make sure you place your fusible fleece or interfacing with the glue side facing down on the wrong side of your piece of fabric. My instructions say to now turn my fabric and fusible fleece over to the other side, so I am ironing on the right side of the fabric. Then press with a hot iron, holding it down for between 5 and 10 seconds in each area. Now take this piece of fabric and place it right side up, and then take the plain piece of fabric and place that right side down. Then pin or clip both these 2 pieces together. Then at one of the ends mark a 3-inch gap for the opening where you will turn it the right side out later. Next, starting at one of the marks that you made, sew all the way around the edge, taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backtacking at the start and the finish. And remember to stop sewing at the mark that you made to make sure that you leave an opening, and then clip all 4 corners, making sure to get close to the seam but don't cut into your sewing, otherwise it will all come undone. Now turn the right side out through the hole that you left at one of the ends. Push a little bit of the fabric out and then you'll be able to start pulling it through. Keep going till it's all the right side out. Then you'll need something pointed, either a special tool or a knitting needle, to push out those corners. Then press the edges and the corners and give a quick iron. Then top stitch at both ends. This will close the opening at one of the ends, and to match, do the same on the other end. Stitch about 1/8 inch from the edge, and remember to back tack at the start and the finish. Now fold in half to find the centre, and then you're going to fold each end in towards the centre, but not all the way to the centre. You're going to fold it in 3 inches. Okay, I've just guessed here, so now I'm getting my tape measure out and I'm just going to check that each side is folded up 3 inches. On this bit here I'm just going to have to readjust because I've folded it a little bit too far. You want both sides to match, you want them both to be 3 inches. There we go, all matching now. Just give it a quick check and we're ready to go. Now you need to sew all the way around the edge of your wallet, about 1/8 inch from the side, all the way round, back tacking at the start and the finish. Remember to sew across the bottom edges as well as the sides. Just sew all the way around in one continuous go. I have used green thread to sew all the way around, even over the yellow, and I'm okay with that. Now we need to add something so we can keep our little wallet closed. And I'm going to use ribbon because I want to keep this as simple as possible. So finger press it so you can find the centre, and then open it out, and in the opposite way find the centre again, so you should end up with a little cross in the centre, and that's where you're going to pin your ribbon. The centre of your ribbon, can you see? You can just about see it there. That's where the centre of your ribbon is going to go. So find yourself a piece of ribbon 28 inches or 71 centimetres long and 1 centimetre or 1/2 inch wide. Find the centre of your ribbon and make sure you match up the centre of your ribbon with the centre of your wallet, and then pin it in place. Then, using a straight edge, draw a line with a pen that you'll be able to rub out later. I'm using a friction pen here which will iron off later. Draw down the centre, and this is the line that you're going to sew on. It's just to make sure that you can get a nice straight line down the centre. Now sew down the line that you've just drawn, back tacking at the start and the finish, and that will hold your ribbon in place. All you need to do now is cut off any loose ends, and you'll be able to tie your ribbon, and that's your sanitary towel pouch completed. Just tie a nice bow in your ribbon and you're done. And the next item is a small drawstring bag for either makeup or jewellery. For this you will need 2 pieces of both plain and pattern fabric that measure 7¼ inches long and 6 inches wide. So 4 pieces in total, 2 plain and 2 patterned. You will also need 2 lengths of ribbon, each 16 inches or 38 centimetres long and ½ inch or 1 centimetre wide. You will need to cut ½ inch of the top edge of both of the patterned pieces of fabric. So just take ½ inch of the top edge, but leave the plain fabric exactly as it is. Take the 2 pieces of patterned fabric and place them together with right sides facing, and do the same with the 2 pieces of plain fabric. Next, mark off the openings where the ribbon will be threaded through. So make yourself a mark 3/4 inch down from the top of the fabric, and use a pen that you'll be able to rub out later. A pen or a pencil that can be removed later. I'm using a friction pen which can be ironed off later. And then make the second mark 3/4 inch below the first mark, and do exactly the same on the other side of the patterned piece of fabric, but not the lining, not the plain piece of fabric. Then make 2 marks along the bottom of the plain piece of fabric. This is where you'll leave open so you can turn your pieces the right way out. It needs to be about 3 inches wide. Then, with right sides together, so right sides are facing, pin or clip together both your pattern pieces and plain pieces of fabric. Then sew down both sides and across the bottom of the pattern piece of fabric, but remember to leave the openings for the ribbons to go through. So, taking 1/4 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish, and each time that you stop to leave the opening for your ribbon to go through. So that's the first part. Go down to where I want the opening, back tack, and then lift my presser foot up, pull it out, cut the thread off, and then start again 3/4 inch below where I finished, so that I'm leaving that opening for my ribbon to be threaded through. Then carry on all the way around your bag until you get to the next opening. Stop and then start again, remembering to back tack at the starts and finishes. You also need to sew around the sides and the bottom edge of the lining fabric, which is the plain fabric, but you also need to remember to leave the opening at the bottom so you can turn it the right way out later on. Take 1/4 inch seam allowance and back tack at the start and the finish. Press the seams open on the patterned fabric. This makes life a lot easier when you come to thread the ribbon through, and then turn it the right side out and give another quick press. Press the plain lining fabric once you've turned it the right side out, then turn the lining fabric the wrong side out and put the patterned fabric inside the lining fabric, and that needs to be the right side out. Match up the seams and pin in place, and then once you've got the 2 seams matched up nicely, you can carry on round and pin or clip in place, ready for sewing. Then sew all around the top edge, taking 1/4 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. Now turn the right side out through the hole that you left in the bottom of the lining. Use something pointed like a knitting needle to push out the corners, and then press. And then push the lining inside, making sure you push it down to all the corners, and you should end up with about 1/4 inch of the lining showing at the top. and that is how it's meant to be. Make sure that your lining is showing by 1/4 inch all the way around the top. Just gently push it up and press it down, finger press it before pressing with your iron. Then using a pen that can either be ironed off or rubbed off, make 2 lines for the top of your casing and for the bottom of your casing. So the first line should go just above the top of the opening that you have on each side, and then the second line should go just below the bottom of the opening that you have on each side. Draw the lines so you can get them nice and straight when you sew. Then at your sewing machine, sew around each of these lines, backtacking at the start and the finish. Once you've sewn both rows of stitches for your casing, then it's time to add your ribbon. To do this, use a safety pin, thread your ribbon onto your safety pin, and then thread it all the way round one side, and then come all the way round the other side, so you're back to where you started from. Pull the ribbon through with your safety pin, and that's one side done. Then all you need to do is exactly the same for the other side, apart from you're threading your ribbon through starting at the opposite side, and you're going to go all the way around and come back out where you started from. If you have a lighter, you can then just melt the ends of your ribbon so that it doesn't fray, but I like to just cut like this, cut into the centre from both sides, making a V, and it seems to do the trick. Once you've done this, then you just need to tie a knot. So you're going to tie both ends together on each side to stop them from coming undone. Go knot in that side, pull it nice and tight, turn it around and do a knot in the other side. And that's your finished either little makeup bag or little jewellery bag. And the third item is a key fob. You will need a piece of interfacing measuring 14 inches long and 3/4 inch wide, and a lobster clasp. And you will need just the piece of patterned fabric that measures 14 inches long and 3.5 inches wide, or 38 centimetres long and 9 centimetres wide. Take your patterned piece of fabric and fold in half lengthways to find the centre. Take a strip of fusible fleece 3/4 inch wide and 14.5 inches long, and place this on the line that you've just marked, on the centre line that you've just marked, so that the bottom of your strip of fleece is resting on the centre line. And then, following the manufacturer's instructions, press in place, then fold in half and press. Then fold and press each side into the centre. Then fold again on the centre line and press. Now take your lobster clasp and thread the fabric through it, and place your lobster clasp in the centre. Then open out both of the ends and make sure that you have the right sides facing each other. Then either pin together or do as I'm doing and use clover clips to hold the two sides together, and sew together, taking 1/4 inch seam allowance, backtacking at the start and the finish. Now you need to press this seam open. So I finger press it first to begin with, and then using a nice hot iron, press the seam open. You will also need to press the side seams back over around the seam you've just made. Next, either pin or clip the side seams together. Then sew around both sides, taking 1/8 inch seam, backtacking at the start and the finish, and removing your pins or clover clips as you go along, and also moving the lobster clasp. Now that both side seams are sewn and your lobster clasp is attached, all you need to do is secure the lobster clasp in place. So put it in the position you want, pin it in place, and then you just need to sew across, remembering to backtack at the start and the finish. And the fourth piece is a small sewing kit to keep in your handbag. For this you will need 2 pieces of fabric that measure 14.5 inches or 37 centimetres long and 5.25 inches or 13.2 centimetres wide. You will need the patterned and the plain piece. You will also need the plain piece of fabric that measures 14 inches by 3.5 inches and a piece of fusible fleece measuring 14 inches by 4.75 inches. First you will need to attach the fusible fleece or interfacing to your patterned fabric, but on the wrong side of your patterned fabric, following the manufacturer's instructions. Make sure you place your fusible fleece or interfacing with the glue side facing down on the wrong side of your piece of fabric. My instructions say to now turn my fabric and fusible fleece over to the other side, so I am ironing on the right side of the fabric. Then press with a hot iron, holding it down for between 5 and 10 seconds in each area. Now take this piece of fabric and place it right side up, and then take the plain piece of fabric and place that right side down. Then pin or clip both these two pieces together. Then at one of the ends, mark a 3-inch gap for the opening where you will turn it the right side out later. Next, starting at one of the marks that you made, sew all the way around the edge, taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish. And remember to stop sewing at the mark that you made to make sure that you leave an opening, and then clip all 4 corners, making sure to get close to the seam but don't cut into your sewing, otherwise it will all come undone. Now turn the right side out through the hole that you left at one of the ends. Push a little bit of the fabric out and then you'll be able to start pulling it through. Keep going till it's all the right side out. Then you'll need something pointed, either a special tool or a knitting needle, to push out those corners. Then press the edges and the corners and give a quick iron. Next, take the plain piece of fabric measuring 14 inches long and 3.5 inches wide, and you're going to cut 3 inches off the end. That won't be needed. Then take the rest of this piece of fabric and fold it in half down the centre to find the middle, and then cut in half. On the fold, I'm just taking a thin slither of fabric from the fold, and then I'll end up with 2 pieces of fabric. If you prefer, you can cut it in half with a pair of scissors. Then cut your batting to size 6 inches by 3 inches. Place your 2 pieces of plain fabric with right sides together, and then put your piece of batting in the centre of one of the sides. When you sew around the edge, you're just going to catch in a small amount of the batting. Mark a 3-inch opening along one of the sides, and then pin or clip together, catching in that batting as you go along. And then sew around the edge, taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish, and remembering to leave a gap for the opening. Clip all 4 corners, getting as close to the stitching as you can without actually cutting through the stitches. And then turn the right side out through the hole that you left. Use a pointed tool to push out the corners if you need to, and then press with a hot iron and make sure that you fold it under the area where you left the opening. Pin or clip the opening together and then sew all around the edge using a top stitch about 1/8 inch from the edge. After the first row of top stitching 1/8 inch from the edge, you'll need to do another row of top stitching inside this row. I would do it about 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre inside this first row of stitching. Now go back to the original piece of fabric and make sure the opening that you left is on your right hand side. Then measure 3 inches from the left hand side and put a mark. This is the line where you'll fold this edge over to form a pocket. Then make another mark 4 inches from the first mark and draw a line. This is roughly around the centre mark. Then draw another line 3¼ inches from the right hand side. Take the left hand side and fold it over on the first line to form the pocket, and then pin or clip in place. I've switched it round here. It was on the left hand side. There we go, back on the left hand side, and that just forms the pocket. Next, take the small needle and pin flap and find the centre. You can either fold it in half to do this, or you can measure it and find the centre. Once you've found the centre at the top and the bottom, draw a line down the centre to join the two together. Then you're going to place this on the line you drew at 3¼ inches from the right hand side. Line it up so there's an equal distance away from the top and the bottom. I think if I remember correctly, it's about 1 inch from the top and 1 inch from the bottom. Sorry, I'm missing part of it on this filming, but there should be 1 inch either side at the top and the bottom. Then when you're satisfied it's nice and level, pin it in place, put a pin at the top and at the bottom. Then take one of your pieces of ribbon and insert it in the hole that you left to turn your needle case the right side out, and this should be on the right hand side. So find the centre and then insert your ribbon inside the opening and pin in place, and then that ribbon will be sewn in place as we top stitch all the way around the edge. The second piece of ribbon is a little more tricky to put on. Fold under the raw edge of the ribbon by about half an inch or 1 centimetre, and then pin in place, making sure that it lines up with the other ribbon when you fold your sewing case. If not, adjust it slightly so it's in the right place. Then top stitch around the edge of your sewing case, backtacking at the start and the finish. I have avoided doing the pocket because that's a different colour. So I've got yellow thread on the top and blue thread on the bottom for this part. Then I'm going to do the pocket separately later, after sewing down the piece for the needles and pins and sewing on the ribbon. Also, when you sew on the ribbon, it acts as a divider for the pocket. So when you turn it over, you'll see there. Okay, trim off any excess threads and then thread your sewing machine up so that you have the correct colour on both top and bottom. In my case, it's turquoisey blue. And sew all the way around the sides and bottom of your pocket, back tacking at the start and the finish, and sewing 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Then give your needle case a quick press. This will also remove any of the friction pen marks you still have on your needle case. Then your needle case is ready to go. Fill it with scissors, thread, pins and needles, and then fold and tie. And the last piece is a small tissue packet holder. For this you will need 1 piece of plain fabric and 1 piece of patterned fabric measuring 6.5 inches wide and 8.5 inches long. The patterned fabric needs to be 1 inch shorter than the plain fabric, so measure 1 inch and cut 1 inch off the end. So you'll end up with the plain piece of fabric being 8.5 inches long and 6 inches wide, and the patterned piece 7.5 inches long and 6.5 inches wide. Pin or clip the shorter sides together. Will line up nicely on the first side, but when you come to do the second side you have to pull the fabric over and line the 2 sides up together before pinning in place. Then sew both sides together, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and backtacking at the start and the finish. Turn the right side out and you should end up with a little bit of the plain fabric showing either side of the patterned fabric. Press both of the sides and then iron the rest of the fabric. To find the centre, fold in half lengthways and press a little in each corner and you'll be left with a mark. Fold each side to just past this mark and pin or clip in place, and then fold the other side over and pin this in place, but make sure it overlaps the other side by 1/4 of an inch at each side, and then pin both sides in place. Then at your sewing machine, sew across both ends, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, backtacking at the start and the finish. Next, you can overlock the edges if you like, but if you haven't got an overlocker, you can just do like me and zigzag. Or if you prefer, you could just trim the seam with a pair of pinking shears Next, box out the corners. To do this, put a couple of your fingers inside and fold it over to make a point. It's best if you do it on the side where you've got the seam, and you know you've done it right when you can see your seam in the centre of the point. Pin in place and then draw a line across. You need to make sure that your line you draw is 3/4 of an inch long and that the centre line is at 3/8 of an inch, or in centimetres you're going to do 2 centimetres across in total, and make sure that the centre line is at 1 centimetres, and do exactly the same for all 4 of your corners, and then sew across all 4 corners on the lines that you have drawn, back tacking at the start and the finish of each. Trim off any loose threads and then turn the right side out, pushing out all of your 4 corners. And then insert your packet of tissues and you're ready to go.